I don't understand why humans throw away love so easily, but I've learned that the best love stories aren't about finding someone perfect. They're about two broken souls deciding to heal together. This concrete kennel has taught me more about human nature than 43 years of living with Joe ever did. My name is Max, and in 3 days, I was supposed to die. But sometimes, the most beautiful rescues happen when two beings save each other. The fluorescent lights above my cage flicker at 2:47 a.m. every night. I've counted 183 flickers since I arrived. Each one reminds me that time moves differently when you're waiting to be chosen, waiting to matter to someone again. In this place where hope echoes off concrete walls, I've become an expert at reading human hearts. And what I've learned might surprise you. I am Max, an 8-year-old American Pit Bull Terrier with gray whiskers and eyes that have seen too much goodbye. I've lived in this 6x4 concrete kennel at Riverside Animal Shelter for 184 days. Longer than any dog should have to count meals through a slot. Before this place, I belonged to Joe Morrison, a 67-year-old retired mechanic who smelled like motor oil and kindness. Joe had gentle hands that fixed broken lawn mowers and scratched behind my ears with equal care. Every Tuesday, he'd share his bologna sandwich with me on the back porch while telling me stories about the cars he'd repaired and the people he'd helped. Joe understood that fixing things, whether engines or hearts, took patience and the right touch. We lived in a small house on Maple Street where the fence needed painting and the garden needed weeding, but love filled every corner. Joe would wake at 6 a.m., brew coffee so strong it could wake the neighborhood, and we'd sit together watching the sunrise paint the sky. "Another day, Max," he'd say, ruffling my ears. "Another chance to do some good." Joe never married, never had children of his own. "Got you instead," he'd tell me. Best decision I ever made. I was his family, and he was mine, until the cancer came quietly, stealing him piece by piece until one day the ambulance took him away, and he never came home. His daughter Linda visited once after the funeral. She stood outside my kennel crying, explaining through tears that her apartment didn't allow pets, that her children were allergic, that she was sorry, so very sorry. I didn't blame her for the tears or the empty promises to visit. I understood that sometimes love isn't enough to overcome circumstances. But understanding doesn't make abandonment hurt less. In this shelter, I've learned to read humans differently than house dogs do. We become experts at detecting rejection in sideways glances, disappointment in forced smiles, pity in the way volunteers pet everyone except the gray-muzzled ones. I've mastered the art of making myself small despite my naturally imposing size, lying in the back corner when families pass, trying to disappear into shadows because sometimes being invisible hurts less than being seen as a problem. My daily routine has become a meditation in patience. Breakfast at 7 a.m., dry kibble that tastes like cardboard and loneliness. Yard time at 9 a.m., 20 minutes of supervised freedom where I can remember what grass feels like. Then the parade of potential families begins, and I practice the delicate art of hope and resignation, watching dreams walk past my cage toward younger, cuter, less complicated dogs. Then one Saturday morning, everything shifted in ways I couldn't have predicted. The first sign something was different came with the volunteers' nervous energy. Sarah, the one who's been here longest, who knows every dog story and cries in the supply closet when hard decisions are made, kept checking her watch and whispering in corners. Her eyes found mine more often than usual, carrying that particular weight of sorrow that means time is running out faster than hope can travel. By mid-morning, the truth crystallized with devastating clarity. They told me I had 3 days left. Monday at 12:10 p.m. would be my final appointment. My last walk to the back room where unwanted dogs go to sleep forever. 183 days of waiting. And it would end not with joy, but with a quiet mercy reserved for animals nobody claims. I'd accepted it by then. Another life that almost mattered. Another love story that almost happened. After Joe's daughter walked away. After months of families who considered me and chose younger dogs. After countless almosts and maybes that never became yes. Acceptance felt safer than hope. Hope was a luxury I couldn't afford with 3 days left. But then, at 11:30 a.m. on that ordinary Saturday, this old man shuffled through the door. Not walking, shuffling, like his feet remembered too many years of standing on factory floors, and his back carried the weight of decades spent fixing things others had broken. Gray hair that needed cutting, wearing a jacket that had seen better years but was clean and carefully mended. His hands looked like they'd repaired 1,000 broken things, scarred, weathered, but impossibly gentle. He wasn't carrying the eager clipboard of potential adopters, or leading excited children toward the puppy section, where hope lives in wiggling tails and wet noses. He just stood in the middle of all that organized chaos, looking completely, utterly lost. His eyes weren't shopping. They were searching for something he couldn't name, carrying the particular emptiness of someone who'd lost something precious and didn't know how to find it again. Sarah approached him with the gentle patience she reserved for scared animals and grieving humans. "Can I help you find someone special today?" she asked. "Just looking," he said, his voice rough with disuse. "Don't really want a dog. Wife always wanted one, but I said no. Too much work, too much mess." But his eyes betrayed his words, scanning the kennels with growing intensity, searching despite his protests. Sarah has worked here long enough to read the language humans don't speak aloud. She studied his face, saw something there that made her decision for her. "Come with me," she said quietly. "I want to show you someone." And then, miracle of miracles in a place where miracles rarely visit, she led him directly to my kennel, past the playful puppies that attract attention with their boundless energy, past the smaller dogs that fit better in apartments and budgets. She brought this reluctant stranger straight to me, the old pit bull that nobody wanted, the dog with 3 days left. He crouched slowly, joints creaking audibly, and looked directly at me through the chain link. Not through me like most people do when they're avoiding eye contact with dogs they can't save. Not past me to check out younger options in nearby kennels. At me. Really, truly at me. Like I was an individual worth seeing instead of just another shelter statistic waiting to become a sad memory. "What's his story?" he asked Sarah, and something inside my chest did something it hadn't done in months. It dared to hope again. That's when I witnessed something profound about human love and loss, about the invisible threads that connect broken hearts across species and circumstances. Sarah told him my story. 8 years old, previous owner deceased, here 6 months, good with people, house trained, no behavioral issues. Just old and unwanted, and scheduled for Monday morning euthanasia. Her voice grew quieter as she reached the hardest part, the part where statistics become individual tragedies. I watched his face transform as understanding dawned. Something soft and angry flickered in his eyes. The righteous indignation that good people feel when confronted with injustice they didn't create, but might be able to address. "That's not right," he said, his voice harder now, filled with conviction born from a lifetime of knowing the difference between right and wrong. "Just because he's old doesn't mean he's worthless." This stranger, this man who'd entered claiming he didn't even want a dog, was defending me to people who were simply doing impossible jobs, making heartbreaking decisions that someone has to make when there are more animals than homes, more love needed than love available. He looked back at me, and I moved closer to the front of my kennel, drawn by something I couldn't name but recognized in my bones. "What do you think, boy?" he asked softly. "You got some good years left in you?" My tail betrayed me, wagging tentatively for the first time in weeks. Hope is dangerous in places like this, but sometimes it's stronger than survival instinct. Harold. I learned his name from paperwork he didn't complete that day. Returned Sunday with a plastic chair from the waiting area. He sat outside my kennel for a full hour in the quieter Sunday atmosphere. Fewer visitors, less chaos. He didn't say much initially, but I could read his story in the scents that surrounded him. Loneliness has a distinctive smell, sharp and empty, like houses where no one cooks anymore, where meals come from boxes and conversations happen only with television sets. But underneath that loneliness lived something else. Kindness that had been buried under grief, but not destroyed by it. "My Rose used to stop at every dog we passed on our walks," he finally said, his voice soft with memory. "Every single one. Look at that sweet face," she'd say. "Look at those eyes." Drove me crazy sometimes. How long our walks would take because she had to pet every dog in the neighborhood. He leaned forward, elbows on knees, reaching through the chain link to let me sniff his fingers. They smelled like motor oil and coffee and the kind of soap that comes in plain bars. Honest smells, working man smells, familiar smells that reminded me of Joe. She'd leave food for strays too. I'd complain about the expense, but I'd buy the food anyway. Couldn't say no to Rose. 43 years married, and I never learned to say no to that woman. That's when I understood what I was seeing in his eyes. He wasn't evaluating me through his own hesitant perspective. He was seeing me through her eyes, through the vision of someone who would have loved me without question or condition. I was being considered not by a man who'd refused dogs for 43 years, but by the ghost of a woman who would have said yes before he finished asking. "She would have loved you, boy," he continued, gently scratching behind my ears through the fencing. "Called you handsome. Probably would have snuck you treats under the table when I wasn't looking. She had a soft spot for big dogs. Said they just had more love to give. I'll think about it, okay?" he said finally, standing to leave. But his voice carried weight that suggested the thinking was already finished, that the decision had been made somewhere deeper than conscious thought. In the place where Rose's voice still whispered yes to every creature that needed love. Monday morning arrived gray and cold, making concrete kennels feel even more like prison cells waiting for final sentences. Harold wasn't there when the shelter opened at 8 a.m. Staff began morning routines while I lay trying not to watch the clock on the far wall, trying not to count minutes until 12:10 p.m. when my time would officially expire. I'd made peace with disappointment by then. Another human who almost cared, another connection that almost happened. It seemed easier to accept the inevitable than to keep hoping and hurting. I'd learned that lesson from Joe's daughter, from families who'd considered me and chosen younger dogs, from months of almosts and maybes that never materialized into yes. At 11:47 a.m., 23 minutes before they would have led me to the back room where unwanted dogs find their final rest, his voice echoed from the reception area like salvation arriving in work boots and a mended jacket. "I'm here for Max," Harold announced to whoever would listen. "The old dog." Humans forget that the most profound love stories aren't about perfection meeting perfection in golden sunlight with orchestral soundtracks. Real love is about two imperfect beings choosing each other despite the scars, despite the gray whiskers, despite the baggage that comes with living long enough to matter. Harold could have chosen a puppy with decades of life ahead, a smaller dog with fewer health concerns, a breed without stereotypes and prejudices. Instead, he chose the old dog that nobody wanted, the one with 3 days left and a lifetime of love still to give. That's not settling. That's recognizing value where others see problems. That's understanding that the best relationships aren't built on youth and beauty, but on souls that recognize each other across the impossible distances that separate species, circumstances, and individual grief. The paperwork took forever. Background checks, references, adoption fees. I kept waiting for something to go wrong, for someone to discover a mistake, for Harold to change his mind when faced with vet bills and responsibility. But Harold just kept talking to me through the process. "It's okay, boy. We're going home. Just got to make it official first." When Sarah finally approached with keys and a brand new blue collar embroidered with Max in white letters, my legs were shaking. The kennel door that had been my prison for 184 days swung open with a metallic clang that sounded like freedom itself. I walked out on unsteady legs, through corridors I'd only seen from behind bars, past kennels of dogs still waiting for their own Harolds, into sunlight I'd forgotten existed. The world beyond those walls was bigger and brighter, and more overwhelming than memory had preserved. Harold's house was small and neat, smelling like her rose. Not overwhelming recent presence, but lingering sweetness of someone who'd lived there long enough to become part of the walls themselves. Photos covered every surface. Wedding pictures, vacation snapshots, everyday moments capturing a lifetime of shared love. Harold caught me studying their wedding photo. Young and hopeful and impossibly happy. "Rose, meet Max," he said to the photograph, then turned to me. "Max, meet Rose. She would have had you spoiled by now." That first night, settling onto the rug beside Harold's chair while he watched evening news, I understood something profound about rescue and salvation. I'd thought rescue was about being saved from something, from the shelter, from euthanasia, from loneliness. But real rescue is about being saved for something, for love, for purpose, for the chance to save someone else in return. Harold had saved me from those 3 days, but I had saved him from 1,000 empty tomorrows. We were both old, both carrying scars, both learning that it's never too late for love when you find the right heart to love you back. Maybe you know someone who feels invisible, overlooked, too old or too damaged for love. Don't walk past their kennel. Stop, look, see them like Harold saw me. Not as they are, but as they could be with someone who believes in second chances. Because sometimes the most beautiful love stories begin not with "once upon a time," but with 3 days left, and someone brave enough to say, "That's not how this story ends." Thank you for joining me on Max and Harold's journey today. Stories like these remind us that love has no expiration date, and sometimes the most unexpected connections become the most meaningful ones. If this story touched your heart, please consider subscribing to our channel. We share more inspiring tales of hope, love, and second chances every week. Your support helps us continue bringing these powerful stories to life. Until next time, remember, it's never too late for love, never too late for rescue, never too late for two souls to find each other and make the world a little brighter.